Good morning, everyone. How are we doing today? It's getting towards Easter, so everyone's clothes are getting a little more Eastery. I like it. So my name is Nick. I'm the youth pastor. And as Andy mentioned, and as you probably already know because you're normal, Easter is next week. It's coming. Isn't that kind of exciting? Can we get a mild applause for Easter coming? It's pretty good, right? You know, I think Charlie asked me to preach this week because he's going to work twice as hard on his Easter sermon for you guys. That's nice. It should be noted that might mean that he's going to go twice as long. So you might want to pack a lunch or something. Might be helpful. I feel like Easter kind of gets sort of the short end of the stick with our holidays a little bit. We got Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, but Easter, I just feel like it kind of got shoved to the side and said, I don't know, we'll deal with that later. Like the aesthetics of Easter kind of remind me of like what a group of 4-year-old girls at a tea party with their stuffed animals might have come up with. Like, we're gonna make it pink and blue, and there's gonna be eggs, and baskets. And we're gonna put candies and chocolates in the baskets. And oh, guess what? A little bunny's gonna deliver it. It's just like, who thought of this? Who came up with, and also I feel like the sports associated with Easter, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of these things, they come with football, basketball, even hockey, but Easter, we get golf? That's what we're doing? I know there's some of you sickos who are really into that, and that's your choice. I just feel like nothing says he is risen like 4 hours of polite clapping. Just hooray. Anyways, happy Palm Sunday. That's what today is, right? Palm Sunday. It was one of my favorites growing up as a kid. This was like the best day because everyone was always telling me don't bring sticks inside, don't bring stuff from the outside inside. But then on Palm Sunday, you'd come to church and there'd just be piles of sticks on the ground, and you could take them inside. And it's why we don't do this here, because it was dangerous. For people like me, you get this stick in your hand and you're like, oh my gosh, I can this is the perfect kind of stick to whip my sister in the back of the legs, because I can do it as hard as I want, but it's not gonna hurt that much. Just that perfect amount of sting that doesn't hurt so bad that you get in trouble, but it definitely makes them angry. It was the sweet spot for bothering my sister. There's just something about hitting people or throwing little things that causes a little bit of chaos that young boys are just really attracted to. We're really into that. I can remember this story. I'm going to tell this story, and there's an 80% chance that I've told it before, but it was probably years ago. So if you start to remember some of the beats of this story, feel free to just pull out your phone and play Wordle real quick and get that over with. But if not, listen, because it's a good one. When I grew up, when I was in high school, I lived in Germany because my dad was in the Air Force, and we were stationed there. And so me and some friends of mine, we would occasionally go do chaotic things. My friend had access to a minivan, and so we would drive through and open the door and yell at weirdos on the side of the road. We thought that was fun. We thought that was the height of, oh my gosh, we got away with it. They don't understand us because they don't speak English. But most Germans do speak English, so they probably did. And one night we decided that we were going to get a carton of eggs and just ride around town with the door open and just chuck them at stuff. We drove by a bar that had the door open. We threw eggs in there and we drove away giggling and laughing because we're so smart. We threw them at random cars parked on the side of the road that probably had no idea what was going on. We just were having a great time doing really smart, awesome things, right? And then we had this brilliant plan. Brilliant. There was this restaurant next to a train station called The Paradox, and they had, for some reason, there was this rumor going around that I don't know if it was true or not, but it was foretold by many that The Paradox didn't let Americans in. They didn't like us. I have no idea if that's true. Never tried to go in. Never knew anybody that tried to go in. It was just what people said. The Paradox hates Americans. Well, we're not going to tolerate that. We're going to throw eggs at them. And they'll reverse their decision about Americans because of that somehow. The story connects because there's eggs involved. Easter, eggs, get it? No, there's another reason. Anyway, so we come up with this brilliant plan, like there's 3 of us, and so we park the van like around the corner, and we position ourselves like one of us is across the street, one of us is like right in front of it, this big glass window, and the other is like down below the train tracks, and he was gonna throw his up, and we're all gonna count, we're gonna make a whistle sound, and on 1, 2, 3, we chucked our eggs, and then we were supposed to meet down at the ground by the train station where my friend Jeff, who was up here, was gonna run, get his car, and then drive around here and pick us up. So we do it, we throw the eggs, and everything's great. We feel this great sense of satisfaction and self-righteousness. We got them back for hating us, theoretically. And so me and John, one of my friends, we're waiting down by the train tracks, waiting, right? And Jeff is a little late with the minivan, and so all of a sudden these cabs, these German cab drivers just pull up real quick, skid their brakes, jump out and start screaming at us in German. Now, John and I played on a German soccer team, so we were very accustomed to people yelling at us in German, right? It was very normal, and we could pick out enough words to know that they were angry with us, and they don't like us, and some other choice nouns and verbs that they chose to use, right? And so we recognize we're in trouble, we've been caught by cab drivers. I guess they're vigilante cab drivers. I don't know. Maybe that's the German form of Batman, is cab drivers. And so they're like telling us, don't move, we're gonna call the cops, right? And so immediately I start getting into, we gotta get the heck out of here mode. John and I were both athletes, right? We could run. And so I start to talk to John, but I know that these guys know enough English to like catch on to what we're saying. So I slipped into like, how do I say this correctly? Urban English. I start saying things like, all right, dog, we gotta bounce, yo. We can't be hanging here no more, dog. We gotta get going. We gotta slide. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just speaking gibberish. That John gets it, because he's a dumb high school kid like me. And so we're speaking in this very, impressive code. And John decides he's not gonna run. His shoes are too loose. I'm like, tie your shoes, John. Like, this is ridiculous. We're running. And he's like, no, I can't do it. So I get to a crucial moment, right? I can decide I'm gonna endure this craziness with John and wait for the German cops to show up to see what the charge is for throwing an egg at a restaurant. And I took the other option, which was to run. I looked at John, and in my beautiful broken, whatever it was, English, I was like, I'm out, dog. And I turned and I bolted, and I could hear the cab drivers just laughing at me as I did it. I fled from trouble. I saw my captors coming, and I left John there all alone. Here's the thing, fleeing from trouble, from punishment, from pain, these are all actually pretty normal human behaviors. And I'm not trying to cover my decision. I regret it. It was stupid. I should have just worked it out with him, but it's actually quite normal to run from trouble, I think. Because you know what we hate? We don't like pain. We don't like discomfort. We don't like trouble. We don't like any of these things. We especially hate pain. It's in the US, it's estimated that 100 million adults suffer from some level of chronic pain. And managing all this pain, just in direct healthcare costs alone, not counting missed work days, lower hours, etc., the price tag on pain in America is about $336 billion that we spend every year to avoid pain. And I get it. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that is a great deal of money. Medicine alone is $16 billion that we spend. I'm no big fan of pain myself. Don't really like it. It's actually the reason why I avoid things like the dentist. Emotional pain sucks too. It's the reason why I keep this beard, because I don't like people looking at me and going, This hides that. This protects me. This is safe. It's the reason why I start and stop working out so much. It hurts. I don't like working out. It hurts. I've never experienced this runner's high that I keep hearing people talk about. For me, it's more like a cardio-inspired attack on my bones, followed by wheezing and a lot of regret. That's what I get when I run. That's my version of a runner's high. So I don't do it because I hate pain. I hate it. And we avoid it at all costs. Not just physical, but emotional pain, right? We avoid that as often as possible. I think men, I'm gonna pick on us for the moment, are probably the biggest offenders here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm gonna go ahead and decide that I'm right. We will go to all sorts of lengths to avoid talking about our feelings with anyone. I found a bunch of jokes on this I'm going to share. It's good. Let's see. Men will literally learn everything about ancient Rome rather than talk about our feelings. There's more value to it, really. Men will sit in a boat staring at a lake for 6 hours with a fishing pole in their hand rather than talk about their feelings. Just easier. Men will literally dress up like a bat and fight criminals and costume villains by night rather than talk about their feelings. We would do that. Men will invent Facebook rather than talk about their feelings. Men, this is my favorite. Men will literally train reindeer to fly, recruit a workforce of elves, rip a hole in the space-time continuum so they can travel around the world in one night in a sleigh giving presents to strangers rather than talk about their feelings. There's no indictment on Santa. It's just probably true. But seriously, pain. We hate it. Emotional, physical pain, we hate it. And we will typically do anything we can to avoid it. Today we're going to talk about how Jesus is different. We're going to talk about how Jesus' actions were motivated by something other than what's going to cause me the least amount of pain. Because I think if we're honest, a lot of us filter a lot of our decisions through that lens. He did the things he knew would hurt. He said the things that needed to be said, even though he knew it would cause people to hate him. He had the hard conversations. He did the hard things. And today, we're going to take a closer look at the pain that Jesus suffered on the cross, the physical, emotional, and spiritual pain he endured. Because in a culture that avoids pain, it's important to understand the pain that Jesus went through, because as we cut through the fog of all the pain and discomfort that he went through, we can see a clearer picture of how deeply the Father loves us. Jesus did not sidestep suffering. He walked straight into it. Isaiah calls him, in Isaiah 53, calls him a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. He wept over his friends, over Jerusalem. He felt the sting of betrayal, bore the weight of our sin, not because he had to, but because he chose to. You know, this week of Jesus' life, starting with today on Palm Sunday, the day he entered Jerusalem, was kind of a real whirlwind of emotions for him. 1 minute, he's being worshiped as a conquering king, and the next he's weeping over Jerusalem and flipping tables at the temple. 1 minute, he's on a pleasant morning walk with his friends, and the next he's cursing a fig tree because it didn't have the fruit he wanted. 1 minute, he's giving a loving, important sermon in the heart of Jerusalem, and the next he's foretelling the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem and the world. But you know, despite the difficulty of each day this week, I think this is really sweet and special. Each night, after a long day of riding these emotional roller coasters, Jesus knew that it was important that he and his disciples go back to Bethany to stay with his very good friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He knew the value and the need for that in the hardest week of his life, he needed to stay where he felt loved. But then on Thursday night, Jesus really put the wheels in motion. At Passover dinner with his disciples, it says in John 13:21 that Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." Now, John and Peter, they sort of exchange some knowing glances back and forth, and John gets the short end of the stick and turns to Jesus and said, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered it, "It's to he whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it." So when he had dipped it, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. And Jesus said to him, "What you're going to do quickly." So after receiving the morsel, he immediately went out, and it was night. Now, this is one of those moments where I'm like, you know, if he really wanted to, Jesus could have stopped and said, "Hey, Judas, you don't have to do this." He could have talked him out of it. He could have convinced him that, hey, you don't need to do this. This is not the right way. But he knows that he has to go through this. He has to feel the betrayal of Judas. And he has to feel the pain of what Judas is going to do. Somehow, however, the disciples didn't get it. Feels pretty clear. Jesus says, "The person I give the bread to will betray me." And he gives it to Judas, and then Judas leaves. And it says the disciples were not sure what just happened. Maybe Judas was just going out to get some groceries or to donate money to the poor on Passover at night. They physically, mentally couldn't handle the truth of what was happening. We see this over and over again where Jesus continually tells them, hey, I'm going to die. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be difficult. And they hear nothing. They don't hear it. It just bounces off their brain. In this moment, again, they physically can't handle the emotional pain of what Jesus is saying, and so they all sort of collectively just reject it. We hate pain. After dinner, it was prayer time. So they went to a garden close by called Gethsemane, where Jesus asked his disciples to stay up with him and pray. It's late, it's dark, it's quiet, and they didn't do it. And I gotta be honest, I feel that pain, I get it. At this point in my life, I don't care what's going on around me, but if you bring me to a moonlit, quiet garden after 10 o'clock at night, tell me to close my eyes and bow my head, I'm out. I'm not gonna make it. I'm gonna fall asleep within like the first, dear Lord, please help. I'm out. So I get that. Jesus, however, knew what this moment was. He knew that it was his last free moment before death. He chose to pray for relief, for strength to go through what was coming. Luke 22:42 says, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. It goes on to say, and there appeared to him an angel from heaven strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. So much pain, so much discomfort. You know, from the beginning, the Son of Man knew this day was coming. For thousands of years, the journey of humanity led to this very day. Prophets had spoken of it. Millions of animals had given themselves in sacrifice, leading up to the one final sacrifice that echoes all those millions of lambs, rams, birds, cows, etc. No one has ever been more mentally prepared for a day of suffering than Jesus, but still, he needs to get down on his knees and cry out to his Father for another way, because the pain, the emotional pain, the mental, physical pain is so much. Even Jesus fears it, and that's okay. After this comes a very crucial moment. Jesus looks up and sees Judas coming with a group of armed men. Here's his moment to run. Here's his moment to tell his disciples, this is the moment you've been training for. Get up, draw your swords, let's do this. This is the moment where he says, I'm out. Where he could look at his friends and say, I'm gone. But rather than that, it says, rise, he says to the disciples, rise, let us be going. My betrayer is at hand. My captors are here. Let's go to them. He doesn't run, he doesn't hide, he doesn't cower, he doesn't do anything other than walk toward those who are here to bring him immense pain. And now it begins. So first of all, it's important to note that Jesus has not slept. This is a night where he did not go to bed. He stayed up all night praying. He's already exhausted before this whole thing begins. Mark 15:15, we'll get to that in a second. He hasn't slept, and he's dragged into trial after trial after trial. He's taken to Caiaphas, the high priest. He's taken to Herod. He's taken to Pilate. And in each of these rooms, in each of these courtyards and places, he's made to endure mental and emotional pain from betrayal, from lies, from being yelled at, from being lied about, from being told that all the good that he had been doing was actually evil. From being told that all of the good things that he brought to these very people in this very room were actually evil, and he deserved death because of them. So much betrayal and pain wrapped up in these things, it's unbearable. I can't even imagine it. If I get told one time that I've done something wrong that I didn't actually do, I break down into an emotional frenzy. Jesus is being told that all the things that he had done up to this point were actually evil and caused him to deserve death. Then in Mark 15, the trials are over, and it says, so Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Scourged. Something no one in this room really wants to talk about or think about or endure, obviously, but it's where you're beaten on your back with a whip with multiple lashes, each of which has bone and metal embedded in them. Nobody knows exactly how many times. The Jewish tradition was 39, but these are Romans. Far more brutal. We don't know how many. All we know is that it was the most pain that he'd ever endured up to that point, and the most pain that any of us would have ever endured 39 or more or less, just the one. Beating with this whip with metal and bone inside it meant to rip your... Now, Jesus could have stopped here. He said, that's enough. I've endured pain. Let's move on. But he continually walks toward his captors. After this, the soldiers take him away, and they laid this purple cloak on his freshly ripped open back, twisted together a crown of thorns, drove it into his head, and hit him with sticks. They spit on him, and they mocked him. Mark 15:20 says, and when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his clothes on him and led him out to crucify him. It's an important note. If we're looking at the pain, that cloak probably sat on his back long enough to really fuse with that blood and the open wounds on his back, so when they ripped it off, pretty much reopened all of that. Such pain. Now it was time for this exhausted, beaten, humiliated man to carry his own mode of destruction through the city he loved, the one where just a few days ago he had entered as a conquering king to cheers and worship. Now he exits a defeated, broken man. He, of course, gets some relief as he's physically incapable of continuing like this. Another man carries his cross part of the way. Now they arrive at the place. Another moment, of course, where he could bolt, where he could just stop this. Stop walking toward his captors and just say, that's enough. I've endured enough. But he keeps moving forward. He's laid down. He's nailed his arms, his legs into this cross. And it's worth noting, of course, that while he's going through this, none of his disciples are around. They're hiding. They've run. Peter has denied him 3 times. Jesus is going through all this pain, this emotional and physical suffering, and Peter, so terrified of receiving even a fraction of that, denies that he even knew Jesus. He hates pain, as do we. I get that. So while Jesus is going through this, he's being nailed to this cross and hoisted up, and he realizes, I'm sure he knew this, but at that point, you can't breathe. The only way to breathe is to use the nails that you've been nailed into to lift yourself up so your lungs get some relief and can take in air and breathe it out, and then you go back down and you can't breathe. And every time you want to take a breath, for 6 hours, we know that he hung there. We know the Bible is very clear that it was basically from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. that he hung there and endured this. And that's physical. And the emotional pain of watching your creation, your beloved, your most precious everything, stare up at you and watch you die, to mock you, to throw things at you, spit at you, bet over who gets your clothes. He watches this straining through the blood and sweat in his eyes. He did not have to be there. He chose to be there. He did not sidestep the suffering, but walked freely into it with the full power to walk away from it. He endured it all to the point of death. As he's dying, he cries out with scripture, quoting David in Psalm 22. It says, at the 9th hour, which that's 3 p.m., Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, he says, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And finally, his pain ended. It was finished. And it says he uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. I think we've covered the emotional and the physical pain. I want to look at the spiritual pain that he endured here. You know, they say that the real torment of hell isn't fire or pain, but it's the eternal absence of God's presence. The soul's deepest thirst left forever unquenched. You know, when Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? That which Jesus prized higher than physical comfort, higher than emotional peace or anything else, his connection to the Father was for those moments before his death, broken. For those moments, those excruciating, terrible, horrifying moments, Jesus felt what it would be like to be without the Father as he bore the weight of our sin. And it broke his heart. But even here, he could have come off that cross. He could have stopped it. Legions of angels coming down. But he chose to stay. He walked toward his pain. He walked toward his captors. He walked toward betrayal. He walked into pain so that we would never have to feel that disconnection from the Father. So that we would never have to cry out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Because of what Jesus did on the cross. You do not have to ever, if you so choose, never have to endure that kind of spiritual disconnection. He defeated death. He defeated spiritual disconnection so that if you choose to, you can have eternal connection with God. I want us to take a moment here at the end and reflect on a couple questions here. I'm going to give you about a minute to just kind of think through these questions. And we're not going to be able to put them on the screen today. I'm just going to read them to you a couple times. This first one. What pain have you been avoiding that you know you need to just walk through? Take a moment. Think about that. What pain have you been avoiding? Spiritual, emotional, physical. What pain have you been avoiding that you know you need to walk through? Think about that for a minute. Second question. What do you want to say to Jesus? Take a moment and speak to him and tell him what you want to say for choosing to endure all that pain so that we never have to be disconnected from God. What do you want to say to Jesus for choosing to endure all that pain so we never have to be disconnected from God? We're gonna finish today, I think a very appropriate way, by taking communion together, by practicing the Lord's Supper, to join with him in that moment where he explained in a very physical way what he was going to go through for us, the breaking his body, the spilling of his blood, and that we get to share in it with him. So this morning, we're going to do it the way we do that. The way we do, there'll be 6 tables spread out throughout the room. Find the table with the shortest line or the one closest to you. There will be, everything that is on the table is gluten-free. And you can take the cup or you can take the bread and dip it in the cup, however you like to do it. And you'll come back to your seats and Andy will lead us in some songs. So if I can, you just pray for us before we dismiss into that. Father, your work on the cross is unparalleled. And it will never be forgotten that even now, so many years later, we look to it and show our gratitude and show our thanks. And we continue in the tradition that you began the night before communion, where we share with you in your pain and in your destruction. Father, we know that you did this out of a deep love for us. And so we try to spend our lives returning that love to you and to your people. So this morning, bless this communion. Bless each and every one of us as we strive to be more like you. Amen. Find a table.